this experience can't have been just for me to understand myself. I think the stuff in here is very human, but also helps us be better people to ourselves and each other if we understand how we operate and why it's actually perfectly understandable for people to reach the point where not being alive anymore feels like a solution.
Hey there, my name is Sean, and this is Suicide Noted. On this podcast, I talk with suicide attempt survivors and ideators so that we can hear their stories. Every year around the world, many millions of people try to take their own lives, and we almost never talk about it. We certainly don't talk about it enough, and when we do talk about it, when we do engage with people in pain, we are not very good at it. Most of us are quite bad at it. That is a problem. And that is one reason why I continue to have more conversations and hopefully better conversations with survivors, in large part to help more people in more places feel, hopefully, a little less shitty and a little less alone. Now, if you are one of those people, a survivor, please reach out. I'd love to talk with you if that's what you'd like to do. hello@suicidenoted.com. Want to encourage you to rate this podcast. 5 stars, of course, on Apple. It's pretty user-friendly. It helps people find it. We really want more people to find it, and especially in places where it's harder to find. Places where maybe suicide is illegal, or there's a punishment on the family, or there's not as much access to Wi-Fi. And they're out there. And they probably speak some English. They need to do that for this particular podcast. And they have some consistent access to Wi-Fi, but they just don't find it. It doesn't come up in their feed. That is one thing, one part of the algorithm. So a simple rating could help. Thank you. Moving forward until I make another executive decision every single week, whether it's 1 or 2 polls per week on Spotify, will be the same question. Pink and Purple Pill. It's part of a book and or solo performance I'm putting together. I will keep you posted on that. I'd love to hear what you think, and I'd love to see your comments under the poll to explain or elaborate on your answer. Also a little tricky to find these polls. If you go to last week's update episode, Carolina in Poland, I share more about how to find it. So if it were me, I'd struggle to find it, so I get it if that's your case. You could do it. I appreciate it. 2 more things, then we shall move on. 1, I'd love to find 1 or 2 people who really understand grants and can help me do some research and dive deep. I've got a long list of them. I've got access to different portals and platforms. I hate the work. I don't want to do the work, and it is taking me away from some other important work. So if that's you, if that's out there, if you got the time, the energy, the interest, shoot me a message. Let us talk. Finally, if you've ever thought about sharing something with me, whether it's audio or written or video, but you do not want to be a part of this podcast, that's great, and we can leave it right there. But if you want me to read it out loud, or want me to play your recording out loud, we could use your name, location, neither, both, it doesn't matter. I'd love to include it. I think it would be a cool segment once in a while to add somebody else's voice, somebody else's experience out there, not only the sort of more formal guests I have. So keep that in mind. You know how to find me, you know how to reach me. And that's it. Just keep in mind, of course, as always, we're talking about suicide on this podcast. My guests and I don't hold back. That is quite intentional. So take that into account as you listen or before you listen. But I do hope you listen because there is so much to learn. Today I am talking with Paul. Paul lives down under in Australia, and he is a near suicide attempt survivor. Hey, Paul, in Australia. Where are you in Australia?
This is Canberra, which is like the capital that no one knows about. It's a nice place because it was built, purpose built after the other cities. Everything just works. The roads work, everything just kind of is cruisy. So everyone says it's boring, but actually, it's nice to live in.
Yeah, it's more exciting when the buses don't work. And so, first of all, thanks for talking. Yeah. Appreciate you speaking with me. Wondering how it is that you stumbled upon a podcast with the word suicide in it, and what caught your interest about it.
So I had my own experience with suicidal ideation back in 2023, where it really reached a peak, and things got really bad and scary for a while in there. After coming out the other side of the experience, roughly a year later, I had given a presentation about it, actually. I felt it was really important to talk about. At the same time, I was thinking we all need to talk about these things. And so I went looking for a podcast, and there's a couple out there. But this one certainly feels more kind of real and natural in the way it's talked about to me. It suits my kind of character. In the back of my mind, I might have been thinking, someone needs to do this. And sure enough, it's already existing. So, excellent, well done, sort of thing. But talking about it in a sort of non-stigmatizing way and talking about it at all is profoundly important. So I think that's why I'm here today.
Nice. Appreciate it. Okay, so you've heard some of the episodes, because obviously if you hadn't, you wouldn't have come to that conclusion. You've heard at least one.
Quite a few, yeah. The one that really stood out to me was Tommy a while ago from the UK. He had the accent from the area which I sort of grew up in, and his story sounded, very compelling. I almost felt like I must have known him or something because it was that close to home. I remember that conversation vividly.
So you're from England?
Yeah, around the area of London where it kind of, it grew and grew and gobbled up the towns around it. So it's now just kind of greater London.
How did you get from England to Australia?
So back in the early 2010s, I was getting a bit fed up of trying to make a good living. Everything seemed to sort of stop, and you couldn't get a good superannuation set up. You couldn't seem to get enough wages to actually pay the bills. So I was applying for a bunch of jobs. One of them was over in Australia. When I got the offer, I came out to look around, and it was just this big open blue sky. And like I said, the city I live in just has these big open roads that just work. You're rarely ever stuck in traffic, and things just, it's very different to the UK where I would get stuck in traffic almost like just insultingly so, like in the middle at 10 p.m. at night. You just like, there shouldn't be a traffic jam, and there was. And I found myself, what the heck? My memory of going to work, I used to get earlier and earlier going to work to try and miss the traffic, and it just kind of chased me. My memory was just 2 rows of red lights all the way to my office every day.
So it sounds like it was a good choice.
This is a great place to live. My career actually took off around that time, and my kind of brief way of summarizing it was that in Australia, I feel hard work can pay off. Whereas back where I was, I could work and just keep hitting a brick wall and not really get promoted or anything. So within that sphere, it worked really well.
What kind of work? Can you tell me or no?
Yeah, academic, universities. So I just kind of landed, started a bunch of collaborations, published a ton of papers, and did all the things you're supposed to do as an academic. And that went remarkably well. But there's actually, we're getting to touch on the story of how I got so unwell as a result of that as well. Okay,
I want to hear about that, a lot about that. Before we get to that, I have a question about that presentation you mentioned. Tell me about that.
So towards the end of my recovery from deep suicidality, part of what helped actually was planning to speak to this audience, and it ended up being around about 300 people from my profession, which is one of those areas where we pour ourselves into our work and into helping other people, but rarely ever look at ourselves and take care of ourselves. So my message at the end of it was, it's important to actually take care of ourselves, or else we lose our effectiveness at some point, which is exactly what happened to me. I kind of ceased to be an effective human for a few months there. That's an important part of why I'm here and why I started talking about this. And actually preparing that helped me understand what happened to me and how I got so sick.
That's interesting. So, what's probably not uncommon, right? In the reflection of it all, you learn more about yourself.
Yeah.
So when you talk about it from age, where do you start that part of the story where you tell us about that stuff?
I actually wanted to, start the talk with the ending, which was that I was much healthier after this journey, and probably had kind of plugged the leaks that were leading to me to sort of bleed out, as I was doing metaphorically in this case. And so I put that at the beginning, and actually showed some data from my Apple Watch showing that, I actually get happy scores. I thought that was impossible, but it's telling me I'm healthy again, which was incredible.
Yeah.
Then we go into the journey that got me sick. For me, it's one of those things where life played out as it did. It's not really anybody's fault particularly. So I had these, unlucky moments, and no one really knew any better or could have done much different, but it ended up with me kind of soaking up a whole bunch of unhelpful beliefs and habits that kind of, now you see it was inevitable that I was going to get sick. But, to me, I was just functioning, doing all the things you're supposed to do, having the life I'm supposed to have, and it wasn't working. I didn't get to feel good.
Right.
The kind of crucial incident that probably sparked all of this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I heard things like this from other speakers on the podcast. But in my case, it was that I had a sister who died when I was still very young. So she was born, made it to 4 weeks because she was premature and picked up an infection. So it had no real immune system to work with, and unfortunately passed away after 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was too young to understand what was going on. And the most likely scenario is that being the apple of my sort of parents' eye up until that point, and then not understanding why that had kind of changed. And suddenly my kind of seeking attention and stuff as kids do was kind of an inconvenience because they were grieving. Like, I didn't get to understand that. I was pre-verbal, the world just changed shape to me, and I kind of started working extremely hard to get approval and attention. It was just ingrained, literally pre-verbal. And so as life went on, I started to realize what had happened, because once a year there would be a kind of anniversary of these events, and the exact same flower would be bought every year at that time. And I started to realize something meaningful's happened. And as I kind of explored it, what I realized is my parents tried to do what they thought was best, which was to hide it from me. Years later, when I said, what happened there, they said, well, we just protected you from it. But of course, I don't think that's actually how human beings work at all. Like at this point in our development as a species, I think we've worked out that protecting each other from things like that and isolating it and pretending nothing's happening probably isn't the way to go.
Why do you think we do that? Why do you think we do the thing not work? And it's pretty common.
There's a lot of layers to that one, probably.
Yeah, sure.
So throughout that sort of, I don't know, the evolution of like family trees and stuff, I went back and checked my family tree, and as part of trying to understand how the heck we got here, and like every generation kind of was just hard work.
Mm-hmm.
So they immigrated across from Ireland, I think. The head of that family died at 28. And so the matriarch of that family kind of carried, all these kids through and just worked every job she could get to keep everything working. And every sort of generation since, it was just hard work. Making and selling buttons, I think, was one of their professions listed and stuff like this. And there was no time. This is kind of one of their explanations. There was no time to pause and grieve and feel your feelings and sort of be sensitive. That what was rewarded, what worked, was just getting your head down and getting on with things. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's just a cultural, historical norm, whatever you want to call it.
And it's hard to talk about. Let's not forget, every layer of difficulty and whatever it might be. It is tricky to sit with those emotions and kind of be okay with it and not rush for a solution or rush to distract ourselves. But my experience has been that we have to really process and feel those emotions fully to be able to get through them. But again, that feels, to begin with, overwhelming and aversive, I think, as well. So that's probably two attempts at explaining it. There's probably more going on as well. I mean, how would you tell a 2-year-old kid or a 4-year-old kid, once they're old enough, how would you explain that to them? It's hard.
It is hard, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm just curious about it. That's the extent of it. I'm not an academic. I'm not a doctor. I'm just like a curious guy, sometimes anyway.
That's good.
Yeah, well, that helps for this work, right?
Yeah, and that's how you become an academic, I think. You just keep asking questions until you end up finding all the research, and away you go.
Continue, please. So you're young Paul.
That early life kind of embedded all these kind of odd beliefs. And so, as I say, in trying to understand what the heck happened to me, one of the kind of ways of understanding things I arrived at was this thing called schema theory, schema therapy. This weird idea, which at the time I really ran away from, was that because that childhood is all you knew and it felt completely natural to you, you just keep gravitating back to it. You actually keep recreating that because that's what you think the world should feel like on a deeply subconscious level. So I ended up recreating that feeling of not being good enough, of having to serve other people to get any approval, of delaying gratification and delaying feeling good in service of other people. I just kept reenacting that right through my 20s and 30s. The effect of that is that I was just getting nothing back and never refilling. And so, yeah, we build towards the inevitable crash. But I worked outrageously hard. And then so I think if I was to sort of have a superpower, it would be that I can just try hard. I can just keep coming back for more until things get done, which has been incredibly effective. And I've had this, to date, this fantastic career. But it's also, as I'm saying it, it sounds unhealthy, right? It sounds, surely that's not the way to go.
Well, does it to you? I mean, it clearly does to you.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of that journey now.
I just think that for a lot of people, they would hear that, or parts of it, like keeping in the good stuff and quote unquote good stuff, like working really hard, achieving, right? I think a lot of parts,
Yeah.
the narrative, not just the United States, but that's where I am. Like one of the first things you hear about people when they're talking glowingly or positive about them, they're a hard worker. Yeah, it makes sense that people would think that's the right way to go, you know? It's not as if you were saying, I was spending my time, dealing crack. And there are people that would say that's the right way to go. And in their world, that's actually arguably noble, but a much smaller percentage of the population. But what you were doing, a lot of people are like, yeah, no, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that, Paul? You're good. But like, meanwhile, you're unraveling. It sounds like, I don't know if that's a bit dramatic or hyperbole, but.
Yeah. So I didn't come from that kind of deprived background at all. Like, I mean, there's two guys on this call who are kind of white, middle-aged, bald males, in that capacity, no excuse at all. There's no sort of severe deprivation in my own kind of life, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I drew on a lot, and it kind of resonated with me deeply before and during my time being ill, I think. And then I used it in writing my sort of presentation afterwards, was actually the BoJack Horseman series. Years ago, I saw like a clip from it that really hit me, where one of the characters is explaining that eventually you have to take responsibility for the problems in your life. That was kind of the message of that bit. And I went back and watched it beginning to end, and in the end, I watched it many times through. I found this quote from the writers who said it's a story of a guy who had every opportunity imaginable, but still can't find a way to be happy. Sort of summed up where I was for most of the first half of my life, basically, assuming I make it through to a ripe old age.
When you said that to me, this guy had I think I'm paraphrasing, every reason to be okay and he wasn't. All I think about is, that's just a myth anyway. Would I rather have a good salary or no salary? I'm going to take a good salary. Like, of course, right?
Yeah.
Does not mean shit. If it did, a lot of wealthy, well-adjusted, quote-unquote well-adjusted people wouldn't try to end their lives.
Correct. I was living this life that I thought I was meant to lead. And if I did that, I would get to feel good at the end of it. At some point, I would make it, in inverted commas. And so in the period before I got deeply unwell and like had this catastrophic burnout where I just ceased to function, I had everything that I'm supposed to have. I'd reached the top of my profession, a beautiful wife, 2 cars on the driveway, this gorgeous house, gorgeous son, 2 dogs, everything you're meant to have. And I was bleeding out, unable to find the goodness in there. As I'm telling it now, it probably feels like, well, what the hell was wrong? Hopefully I can get to the bottom of that as we talk. But
I really, really focus on words. What the hell is wrong with me, right? Take out the word hell because that's going to have a sort of pejorative, innate thing to it. But the exact same question is a very good question to ask. It's just with a different tone, right? Like so Paul, what was wrong with it? It's a question I would ask. So what was wrong? Right? So it's a good question. It's just that, anyway, I don't know my point. I'm curious because I know you've thought about this a lot. Is it something wrong with you, or is that how you would frame it? Because I know you're probably about to talk a little bit more about that stuff. Was it a wrong, Paul, or just something else?
What was wrong with me was basically that I had been recreating that childhood where I had to work excruciatingly hard to get any kind of approval. I thought it was how life's supposed to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I never got to feel good. I was just doing what kind of I thought you're supposed to do to have a good life.
Sorry, and it should be said here, you actually were kind of crushing it. If you didn't have the wife, the dog, the kid, the house, or the things you named, you and others could easily look and say, Paul, you're askew. Look around, look at your contemporaries, right? So I would think it's even harder for you to figure out.
This was the thing. And this was kind of why I waited and pushed and waited to the point where I was completely gone. I was completely unable to think straight. And I was so fatigued from fighting suicidal ideation that I just kind of let go of the steering wheel. So, as we get to the point where I was really ill, the needle came off the record. I can't remember important chunks of my life during that time. But to answer the question, what was wrong with me? If you imagine that lifestyle of only focusing on serving other people and that recipe for, well, if I can't do it, I'll just try harder and try again. I was completely blind or numb to my own needs. I couldn't hear them. If you told me like to listen to my body and sort of, what do I need right now? I could not tell you. And it was much later, when I found this list of human needs from the nonviolent communication people, it's a list of human needs, and you're supposed to say, when you did that, it frustrated or blocked my need to feel this or to achieve this, and we need to talk about how that could be changed in future. So it's all about, this is my need, and we couldn't get it. And it gives you a list of all the human needs.
How many human needs are there?
There was like 50.
There's 50 human needs?
Yeah, and as I say, I was a bit astonished by that as well. Okay. Really annoyingly, I used to study motivation at one point, and we talked about human needs in terms of just the need to feel connected to other people, the need to feel like you can achieve stuff, and the need to feel like you're in control of your own life, which probably oversimplifies things a lot, but it helped us to kind of, do our research. But the Centre for Nonviolent Communication listed them all out, and it's under some subheadings, but there's just things like acceptance, affection, hope, as well as food and movement and rest and all those kinds of things. And I just found this list and thought, okay, that's interesting. And then someone kind of hit me with the sledgehammer of, and you cannot make up for a lack in one area by overcompensating somewhere else. And that I was like incredibly competent, incredibly, I think, respected. Food, water, nourishment, all those things totally under control. Like I had a good livelihood, but I was not getting what I needed in some areas. And I ended up kind of asking for it as well, explicitly, like I need to feel these things in my life. And I couldn't get them. And I ended up just getting iller and iller.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. When you were trying to figure out the needs, there are 50 needs, but I imagine some felt more important to you than others.
There was things which I was doing, which I took pride in. And I know I'm good at that. At the time, I would have said that's what's important to me.
I see. Right.
And there was things that I kind of shied away from and ducked away from. Like, that sounds a little bit either airy-fairy or woolly or even maybe like embarrassing in some cases. And I just kind of glossed over those, but they were the ones that I was actually crying out for.
Well, let me ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot. You can always decline to answer. I can edit it out. As ambassadors for middle-aged men, give me a couple that were hard for you to embrace that I'm betting is a pretty common thing for middle-aged people and others, of course, too. But
yeah, so the ones that I struggled with were around physical touch, intimacy in all its forms, like physical intimacy, like emotional intimacy. Like I kind of didn't worry about those things. The feeling of feeling loved. So people would say like, we love you and stuff. Even if they 100% mean it, it wasn't landing. And one of the things that shattered me again wide open was when I was desperately trying to find a doctor who would be able to take me on and treat me. One of them asked me this question: when was the last time you experienced a prolonged period of joy and hopefulness? Me being me, I kind of just evaded the question. But then he pulled me back to it. He was good at his job. I couldn't think of anything, in a decade. Yeah, my whole 30s, like, could I experience joy and hopefulness? Completely gone out of my life. And there must have been instances where good things happened, but for some reason, like hope for the future and joy was just, I wasn't getting them. I was always solving problems and taking on other people's problems and solving those.
Yeah. I got you. The other question I wanted to ask is, what tempted you to find, however you stumbled upon the nonviolent communication list? At some point, you're in the grind, right? And you're working hard and you're paying the bills and everything you have to do. But later you realize that great expense. But like when you're in it, it's hard to know you got a problem because you're just in it so hard, right? So how do you start to be like, I think there's a problem?
Yeah, I think I can point to a particular moment where, again, I was just spiraling, didn't really know how to process what was in front of me. But I was going to a travel trip, long distance. And of course, you go to the airport bookshop and there's all sorts of, lifestyle books. And one of them was about polyvagal theory, which I heard about and thought, sure, I work in these sort of spaces. I'd like to know about that. And so it talks about, obviously, our sort of fight or flight reflexes, our rest and digest reflexes. And there was a whole half of the page devoted to creativity, connection, safety, playfulness, joy. And again, I had never recall experiencing those things. Like the idea of having a hobby and playing felt completely self-indulgent. Surely I should be productive and doing useful things instead. So somehow I'm sat in this airport waiting for my plane and just going, what the heck? And that's what led me to like, oh, we need these things. They're not just kind of luxuries. We actually need to feel those things as human beings, because the way I've explained it in the past is that we don't stop when we've got food and water and a roof over our heads. We actually keep going out into the world and exploring. And that's baked into us. That's why we're such a successful creature. And we need to experience joy and playfulness and exploration and social connection. We need those things. And, I'm as much to blame as everybody around me, basically. Like, I just thought that's how life's supposed to feel. I went through probably 20 years of some type of depression.
Yeah.
So one of the diagnoses was kind of treatment-resistant depression, because we would try all the medications and sort of talking therapies, and it really wasn't making a dent. And it would just happen every year, a few times a year, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. I think in my immediate reflection is because there was suffering involved during that time period, and there's been consequences and suffering in resolving it afterwards. So I ended up I had to cause, I think, some pain and discomfort to stay alive.
Right. And are you married at this time, or does that happen later?
I was married back then. Yeah, that was a successful marriage. It's really hard to be critical at all, because we did everything we set out to do, and we helped each other enormously develop as people, and become more capable. And like I said, we got to the point where we had everything we'd set out to do. And then I kind of pulled my head up and gone, well, how come I'm still feeling bad all the time? And this is when this kind of concerted effort to get better and lots of deep and meaningful conversations, it didn't happen fast enough. So people might say we were trying or stuff, but I ran out of time. I hit this point where the depression kind of tipped over into suicidal ideation. And over the course of, I would say, 6 to 8 months, it got more and more intense, more and more frequent. As I alluded to, I was fighting it, and therefore I got exhausted. Yeah, I was lying awake at night, but it was this sort of deep spiritual level exhaustion. I just kind of ran out of fight. It became painful, physically painful. I would be lying awake at night, and it felt like I was being attacked by bull ants, swarming over me.
Wow. Okay.
And it was suicidal ideation, but it was physically hurting me.
You're married. Your wife is seeing you. She certainly sees that you're struggling.
It is a tough spot. I think as a couple, we hit the point where we couldn't help each other anymore, and not for lack of trying. With the best intentions and the best efforts, I would try and sort of just explain what I was hoping for and looking for, and there would be sort of some shifting of the sands, and then nothing worked. And as I say, I ran out of time. I was getting sicker and sicker. It reached a point where a couple of times, as I say, I took my hands off the steering wheel. I couldn't keep fighting. The suicide ideation had reached this kind of peak. I had all these different types of plans, plans to make it painless, emergency plan to get it over and done with really quickly. And I was so exhausted from fighting this that there are enormous chunks of that time where I can't remember a thing.
Yeah, no, I just want to remind myself and the audience, while this is happening, are you still the Paul that's busting ass at life?
Yeah.
So you're going to work, you're doing other things. I would imagine they got compromised in some ways. But if I were to see you somewhere in Canberra, walking out of your house that morning, I'm guessing I would see that he's all right.
If you saw me in the office, if you saw me out and about, there'd be zero sign that I was suffering. The one slip happened when I put my camera on in a work meeting, and I was lying on my office floor, and people were going, "What the hell are you doing?" But I was so exhausted. I was just mostly listening and sort of occasionally chiming in, but I was lying flat on the floor.
We talk about exhaustion and how when you're suicidal, it doesn't, and it extends beyond that. This extends to people who are not suicidal, but it's the going through the motions, because you have to, unless you're going to really radically change your. Sometimes you just can't quit your job because you have a mortgage, whatever else, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have to fake it. Let's use that word loosely. That makes it much harder. I know I'm not stating anything that's genius level, doctoral worthy research here, but it's worth reminding, or at least discussing, because we're talking about stigma. That was one of the words you used when we first got on. Take somebody who's suicidal and then ask them to fake their life for 6 months, doing the life that in many ways got them there in that shitty spot. See what happens.
there was a couple of times where I was hanging around with people who were even more conversant and kind of informed about mental health and suicidal ideation, and they made recommendations to, like, agencies and stuff about how to help. They were like really knowledgeable people. And I spent the day with one of them once driving around, and they didn't say a thing. They didn't notice that I was ill at all.
Isn't it interesting how good we get at some of this stuff? Because, hey, if they know it's going to put a kink into my thing that I got to do every day and I'm the man and all this shit.
The narrative that I was being told was like, well, you go and fix yourself and get better, and then come back to this. And if I just started to rephrase it slightly, like, if you go and do a bunch of work on yourself and come back to exactly this same situation, the same thing that kind of broke you, it starts to change flavor a little bit. That's what I was doing. And so I was doing tons of, like, as I say, medications and therapy and everything I could get my hands on, and devouring self-help books. But if I'm going back to the same situation and the same battles I was facing, I was going to get sick again. And eventually one of my friends had this quote on his slides, how when the plant doesn't flourish, you don't blame the plant, you change the pot that it's in. And that's when I started to realize, I think it was my sort of situation around me and the life that I had built, exactly like I thought you're supposed to build a life, that was making me really, really unwell. Because I tried everything else. This is the thing. So I tried every single thing I could think of and afford to get better. At one point, it was mentioned to me that maybe your work and your sort of home life are the problem. And in particular, like, I actually stood up and walked out of the therapy session at the thought of, like, my home life being the problem. No, that's not it.
Right.
It's either all my fault or it's work, but it's not that. Absolutely not that. I just wouldn't have it. But in the end, once I tried every single other option to get better, I sort of leaned towards changing the pot that I'm planted in, so to speak. And the change was really quick. The clouds, the fog that I was experiencing started to fade very quickly. And I started getting these moments of real clarity very quickly. Yeah. So as an example of kind of seeing what was going on, I was in a cafe. I'd been sent away by the doctors at this point. They actually said, we will put you in hospital against your will, or preferably you go far, far away, stop everything and just focus on yourself. And I was very lucky to be able to organize that. And so I'm in this cafe, and I noticed that the waiter was having a really bad day and looking really upset and frustrated. And I felt myself want to be the best possible customer to cheer them up. And then it hit me like, why am I taking on that person's problems? Not to belittle, like, that's a human being having a bad day and it's a nice thing to want to cheer them up. But my first unconscious instinct was just to be like, well, I'll make it better for them.
That's awareness. That was
one of those little zaps of, you see what's going on? You see what you've been doing to yourself?
Oh, man. But doesn't that come with some, to me, when I hear that, and especially, and I'm going to ask you a little bit more about the plant that you were talking about that you had to change. I think that gets into, you used the word wife in a past tense, so I think that's where we're going. Isn't it hard to say, I made this life, I did it the right way, I did it the way I was told, on paper it's great, and I essentially wasn't right?
Yeah, I mean, it's utterly heartbreaking.
It's not that you could have predicted, because you could have done it all that way and it would have been just fine. We don't have a crystal ball, right? Not that you were wrong, not that you didn't get it right, not that any of that stuff, just it didn't work out. And God damn it, like, was there, I'm not trying to pour fuel on fire here, but was there a sense of like, kind of wish I could go back 10 years, figure it out earlier, things would have been better, I wouldn't have had to deal with all this shit? Did you, or are you like less like me? I'm a little bit like, my doctor calls it regret oriented. Are you a little more like, okay, well, at least I'm better or getting better, so that's good?
Yeah, my voice started to crack there because it is utterly heartbreaking and shattering to have worked so hard at that, and to be letting go of that life and hurting a lot of people. The only kind of reason I can still look back and manage the regret is that I was gone. I was checked out. I'd accepted completely that I was going to die. I'd read entire books about like how a good life is, characterized by a good death too. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to go out on my own terms, and it happens to all of us, so it's going to happen. And it was just this kind of glimpse of other ways of being that made me realize, like, oh, actually, I can. Like, that's probably better than dying. Have another go.
Yeah.
I talk about it as a crucible. Like if you imagine you put something into like a metal into a crucible and you get it incredibly hot and all the impurities burn away, there was not much left of me after that burnout.
You called it a bleed out earlier. I like that you're using both of these.
Yeah. So in terms of hemorrhaging energy, bleed out. In terms of almost exactly hitting the definition of psychological burnout. Yeah.
All right, so look, we got to pause for a moment, Paul, because look, I don't know how many podcast episodes you listen to, but I got a thing with memoir titles, okay? Bleeding out, burning out, and we read one other phrasal verb, but it's the up part because you are doing. It's like bleeding out, burning out, crushing it, not that. You know what I mean? Like bop, bop, bop.
Yeah.
So, and I think then we'll need a subtitle as always. I don't know. All right, just play with it. I mean, you're the academic. You're the yada. But like, let me do what I do well, and you do what you do well. How's that?
Yeah. I love it. I love this part of the episode where you look for the memoir title because I haven't got a memoir in mind, but I do play with like ideas for novels and little books like that. So it's fun seeing how that plays out.
Ideas beget ideas, creativity, which is definitely on that list of 50 things in that book.
Yeah. As I say, I was definitely on top of my game. And whenever people had to sort of evaluate me for my job and stuff, there was nowhere they could pick me up and say like, oh, you're struggling over here. So crushing it probably would be appropriate. But without even realizing, I was just getting more tired, more burned out, not getting to feel good, not experiencing hope and joy. When you're in that type of pain and it feels completely trapped. So I actually went and looked up one of the sort of biggest predictors of suicidal ideation, and it's feeling trapped. And I couldn't think of a way out.
It should be said, when you said you couldn't think of a way out, I'm going to bet a whole lot of money that I don't have, but if I did, you were thinking really hard all the time about how to get out.
How to get better. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't that you weren't thinking about it. There was nothing else to think about at some point.
I tried all the things, and I became hyper competent at a bunch of stuff. You know, I could fix my house. I could fix my car if I had to. I could do a whole bunch of stuff really sort of smoothly and efficiently. And there's an episode of Scrubs where one of the doctors, who everyone idolizes, you know, they come to him with problems and he keeps going, it's okay, we'll just do this. It's okay, we'll just do this.
Right.
And so eventually this poor kid, you know, is unavoidably going to die of cancer. And finally the doctor kind of just breaks. And that's kind of what happened to me. Like everyone would come to me and it's okay, we'll just do this. We'll just do this. Until there was, I'm not getting to feel good. I'm not winning this.
So in those moments, that's where I think, again, this isn't original thought, but it's Sean's thought. That's where you're getting at the real danger zone, right? Which could last for some people an hour, it could last 10 years. For you, it sounded like it was a matter of weeks or maybe months. That really, like, what I mean by that fulcrum of I'm ending it, or I might have a thread of light that I might pursue.
I trace it to being about 8 months. I now understand it as like almost like a defense mechanism that popped up in those circumstances. And it sounds awful, but if the pain can't be resolved, I know how to get rid of it, mate. That voice showed up. And so I'd refer to that like as the arsonist, like just burn it all down. That was borrowed from internal family systems therapy, you know, and defense mechanisms and things like that. And it just made sense to me that, I recognize this voice now.
You've been doing your work because you're throwing out some stuff here in family systems and the nonviolent communication. I bet there's dozens of others. So you weren't fucking around.
Yeah, as I say, I devoured every book I could to try and work out how to square the circle. It wasn't possible until I kind of let go of the steering wheel.
What does that mean in practice? It sounds good. I'm just going to let go. But what does that mean?
Yeah, I had no choice. I was completely gone. I didn't know how to fight it, and it was winning and it was hurting, and sort of it ended up like one of those like finger traps you see in films. Like the more I struggled, the worse it got, the tighter it got. So I kind of started to just exist with these thoughts and let them happen. And this wonderful moment happened where it hit me that like, God, this is impressive. Like when you stand back and admire a firework display, I was like, if my body and my brain can do this much harm to me and hurt me this much, I have to admit that's impressive. Like it was just a little moment of shock and awe. And it separated me from being gobbled up by it to actually standing back and just okay, that's the whole thing. It's not me sort of thing.
So just a couple of things popped in my head, which is, obviously it just takes a tremendous amount of whatever the word is, right? Intestinal fortitude, resilience, or whatever the word of the year is that everyone uses. But because when you're trying, I believe this is true for most people, you're trying the therapies, you're trying the modalities, you're reading the books, sometimes it's the medications, whatever else, and it doesn't work. What I don't hear a lot of, I'm sure it's out there, I just don't hear much of it, is that is a dangerous place. I hear a lot about, just get help. Take the meds. Okay, I took the meds. They don't work. I went to the hospital. It didn't work. I went to the therapist. It didn't work. Sure, we can keep saying, go to another one, do another one, right? That you can do that forever these days. So I would imagine, again, it's just got to be very disheartening at a minimum.
And it's your only kind of solution that you can think of is to try harder. And at the same time, you're getting more and more exhausted. That's disastrous.
Because that's been Paul's thing since he was 4.
At least, yeah. At least, that's all I knew.
Do go more. And so you end up being like that analogy you just said about the fingers or the hand in the movie.
Yeah, it just hurt more and more trying harder and harder. One of the thoughts that kind of is worth sharing, that utter exhaustion from fighting this suicidal ideation over the course of many months is a part of probably why I survived, because I was too exhausted to go and do the thing. There's that awful saying, fatigue makes cowards of all of us. And on some level, there are bits where you feel like cowardly, like I didn't do the thing. Honestly, I was exhausted. I couldn't go and make the preparations and go through with anything.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it comes up where people get on medication and that's when they end their lives because they can.
Oh, yeah, maybe. And something else I don't talk about enough is that medications have side effects. It's really under-discussed how you actually end up rolling through a bunch of medications, seeing if they work and the side effects are tolerable. That can be months and years of a journey to find the one that works for you. And that's hard. You need support through that time. And it can't just be well, you get yourself better and then come back to the situation as it was.
When you're saying ideating over months, some of it is active, quite active, right? It sounded from what you shared that at some point or another, there was at least a couple different possible methods in mind.
Yeah.
You kind of already answered it because I think part of it was you were exhausted. I wonder if there's another component at all. I always wonder what keeps someone from doing it. If they're really in that space, and it sounded like you were, exhaustion's part of it. Is there something else that you've identified?
One of the ways I've understood it is that arsonist was one of the defense mechanisms trying to stop the pain. Long before that, there was a bunch of other defense mechanisms, who've been around a lot longer. And they very much are about helping this creature survive. And I think between them, some of them are pretty fierce. They will stay up all night and get a piece of work done. They will, do whatever it takes to make things better for the people around me, sort of thing. And I think they kind of at least managed to lock the place down a bit. I can't explain that as well as I'd like to, but they just about clung on.
Yeah, because I think for somebody who hasn't been there, it's a really hard thing to understand. Because for some people, ideating means once or twice a week, I think about it. And I'm not discounting, I'm minimizing that. But what you're sharing, when you're talking about what you were talking about, it is, I would imagine, most of the day, every day.
Yeah. And there are times where I could just get into work and get on with things, but it was incessant. And of course, in the quiet times at night, it was at its worst. The rest of the world's asleep.
Yeah. And you have spiders crawling on you or whatever it was.
Balance, I'm sure of it. But yeah, so one of the worst moments where it peaked was kind of, I found myself looking around the top floor of a hotel, trying to find the way onto the roof. And that was it's got really bad. I barely even know how I got there, but I'd been fighting it so hard that I just kind of, found myself up there. And of course it was all locked down like it's supposed to be. So my Google history kept redirecting me to call the helpline over and over again. Yeah, I had all these different options and sort of plans, but just never quite. The closest I got was probably not getting through the fire escape onto the roof that day.
I was going to ask you, how close did you get? Right, that was it.
It was something I don't remember how I got up there. I knew I was in extraordinarily painful moment, but I just remember feeling lost and disoriented on the top floor of a hotel.
That's scary.
Yeah.
What happens if you get out on the roof?
I have no idea. I might have got scared at the edge and backed off. I might have, suddenly got really brave and gone. I have no idea what would happen if I'd have got up there. And now looking back, 2 years later, probably a very good thing. In that moment, it was like embarrassing and frustrating and even more sort of saddening all at once. I just kind of traipsed back down these stairs to my room and just kind of slumped there and felt crap.
Yeah, it's like I was thinking if I asked you at 15 or 25 years old, one day you're going to be trying to get on a roof and seriously trying to end your life. I'm going to guess, but if I'm wrong, you'd have been like, I don't think so.
No way. Wouldn't have occurred to me. And until that 8 months of severe suffering, even with the decades of depression before it, it never occurred to me that I would end up in that situation.
I bet I have no idea how you were before all of this, but I think if people go through things like this, it is almost impossible not to come out of it a much more empathetic human being.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was on that journey anyway. That idea that sort of, life makes you more selfish over time, I find the complete opposite. Like, I really feel like the connection and empathy is what is part of being human. But now when I see people struggling, it's almost like I have to be careful not to be sort of taken along with it, and stay in a position where I can stay helpful rather than sort of responsible rather than joining them in the suffering sometimes.
So I think the word you used was plant, your environment, because it sounds rather central to this story. What were you referring to specifically, and what changed there? Because I think that was a big part of the change.
Between then and now, basically everything's changed. At the time, what it ended up happening was there was almost two options, two phases almost. One was to let go of everything with no idea where I would end up. And the other was to try and build something that didn't hurt me all the time. One has to happen before the other. I kind of got sent away by the doctors, tried to sort of come back and actually I just couldn't bring myself to go back into my old life. So there's this really weird moment where I end up in a borrowed apartment property, and I've got a fridge, a bar fridge that keeps your beer cold, and a table and a chair. And yet somehow I felt more hopeful in that moment than I had done for decades before.
Well, the movie either starts there or ends there. I'm not sure. That's the scene. That's the opening or closing scene. You get to play around with it.
I had no idea what the solution was. So when people asked me like, well, what are you going to do? What's your solution? I had no clue.
What do you think it was about what you just described, which is definitely not what Paul planned for his life, and it felt better? I don't know if you used the word better, but what do you have any idea what that was?
I think it was that removal of the feeling of trappedness. No solution, no knowledge of what the answer was. Suddenly there was other options. Anything else, it became possible. I honestly feel that the old version of me did die. So I didn't sort of go through with a suicide in the traditional sense, but there was this moment, really stark moment where I was on a beach on my own in the middle of nowhere. I had this extremely strong emotion that felt like when I had to let one of my dogs go a couple of years earlier. And I sort of cradled the dog in that moment and nursed him through the last few moments of his life. And the exact same emotion hit me that I was letting go of me.
Right. I think I just changed the end of the movie. Now it's on a beach. Did you get separated from your wife? Is that part of this?
Yeah, unfortunately.
I can hear it. I can hear it that you don't want to really go there, but I think people were wondering. So if you want to share that.
As I kind of realized what I needed to do, I did ask to be separated from my wife. That's one of the few kind of difficult points still, because actually that's also led to my son kind of effectively stepping away from me as well. There's a narrative of like that person I used to be, and I must have planned all of this and stuff. And how do you disprove that? Like, I can't fight it. I can just say I'm standing here in front of you saying that's not what I did.
And how old is he?
He's a teenager.
So I don't know that age so well, but like, especially if they're younger, they're not going to get it. Teenager might a little bit, right? But they're not going to get why dad needed to leave to save his life.
Unfortunately not. Yeah. So that's probably the last bit that I would love to resolve, but I've actually had to kind of accept that might not improve. And to align with the other part of the story here is that I still have to go and experience joy, because without that I was dying literally. So if I can, I'll still try and sort of have good experiences whilst accepting that I might not be able to persuade people from my old life, that I'm actually still here and still want to support them.
Well, the simple, quick thing that I think a lot of people would say is like, aren't they just so happy for you that you're doing better?
My experience has been no.
And again, truly not a judgment. That's what I think some people might suggest. I love this person. They're doing better, but life isn't so simple and relationships are not nearly that simple. I know.
So yeah, like I say, I understand it was probably quite sudden from other people's point of view, even though I live narrated my downfall and talked people through it as I was struggling to sort of suddenly not be there. And actually I had no intention, when the doctor sent me away, I had no intention of like, this is it. But when I came to try and go back, I couldn't. And that's when it started to, actually that was the final departure. And I do regret that I sort of said, I'll be back, I'll see you soon. But that's not what happened. And that, it turned me into a liar in that respect.
How long were you in the hospital for?
I never went to the hospital. So they sent me away. They said, if you can afford to, go take care of yourself, you wouldn't enjoy hospital. So I just found a house by a beach and me and my dog walked up and down it multiple times a day. My memory of that time period is just eating, sleeping and dog walks and nothing else. And it's all just a blur. And then gradually finding myself and getting energy back. And then gradually thinking how to continue existing. And that's when I started to realize I have to change the metaphorical pot that I'm planted in. The place where I worked, like many universities, had a financial crisis. They had to make redundancies. And so I ended up not working there anymore either. So my whole previous life dissolved over the course of about 18 months. And if you sort of put the headline, separated, burnout, lost job, it sounds like the worst thing in the world. And yet actually this is probably the healthiest I've been in a long time.
My very cynical brain goes to, man, if Paul were like some other people and he was broke, this has a different ending.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
And you worked for your money and I'm glad you had it. But the truth is, that's the world we're in. I mean, it helps. I know you didn't live in luxury, but going on a beach for a couple of weeks, whatever it is, you got to pay, there's just life costs money.
Yeah. There was a huge element of luck in that because I was off work and I was just texting friends and one of them was moving house and me being me, well, I can't work, but I can lift stuff. So off I went. They heard about my situation and all the family went inside away from me and came out with the keys to the coast house and said, off you go. I mean, I couldn't have afforded to just go away and live that life, but they just said, look, we can see you're not having a good time. Go.
Yeah. I love shit like that when I hear that, man.
That was a life-changing moment.
Yeah, that's right.
But you're right. Like I did have in some resources to be able to find doctors, to be able to roll through medications, all these things. And without that, this story could have ended very differently.
Yeah, and that's just more of me sort of commenting on other stuff that you just reminded me of. It's not at all
unavoidable. It's there.
But I do appreciate you saying something that I think sounds almost un-American, and that makes sense because you're not. And that is like, you don't take all the credit. It was all you. And in the past, I'm guessing Paul, the constant worker, probably did take a good amount of credit for things because you were busting your ass. I don't know if I'm connecting the dots here. I don't want to insert a narrative that is not accurate, but there was just, I appreciate and I'm not kissing your ass here, but I appreciate, I don't know, humility or something to say you didn't do it alone.
No, there was a whole bunch of lucky coincidences and important moments. Like I said, most of the times I've referred to being shattered in this conversation were actually breakthrough moments that I had to be shattered before I could start rebuilding.
Earlier in our talk, you're talking, I think, referring more to earlier years, and you used the word a series of unlucky moments. And it's a nice full circle, which I like, that you just refer to more recent events and you're improving as just the opposite, essentially.
In a way, one of the questions I believe you might ask is, what's the message to your younger self?
I don't always ask that, but damn, if you're bringing it up, I will.
And I feel like, on one hand, if you had gone back and told me you're going to end up sick, go easy on yourself, I wasn't ready for that message. I would have just carried on working hard. That was kind of really baked into me. However, if you could go back as early as possible and really impose, you are loved. There is love out there waiting for you. There is good luck out there waiting for you. There's other ways of living. And actually, like, you deserve that love. You know, you haven't got to earn it. If that had been the message, I think we might not have ended up in this circumstance.
Well, given where you are now, would you go back and change things?
I struggle to make any comparison. I'm now here where I am. I'm actually in a really good situation, still sort of trying to work out how to earn money again. I'm wiser. I'm probably better able to help people. I am still supporting my former family as best I can. And that's probably better than not being here. I haven't yet got to the point of thinking, well, this had to happen. And that horrible idea that, like, you know, it all works out for the best kind of thing. Never quite subscribed to that.
Yeah, because it's not true. That's why.
Yeah.
You're an academic, you're a smart man, and smart people know truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does.
So the idea of being a bigger plan, like the idea of like, oh, someone planned this, like, no. This is just riding my luck as best I can, I think.
Yeah. When was the last time, do you recall, that you thought about killing yourself?
I'm going to link that to another concept. When people say you've recovered, my experience is that it's never going to go away. Like, that solution to hard problems of, well, we can just end everything. Once that popped up in my sort of background of my mind, it still pops up sometimes. But it's much easier to say, like, thank you for your contribution, but actually we're looking for other solutions right now. But it's still there. It still comes up. So there have been a couple of moments, because like rebuilding a life is hard, where that thought came up, but I've been able to sort of stand back and say, yes, but what are the rest of my kind of committee of solutions offer, please?
Fair. Here's my guess. One person knows we're talking.
Yeah. I forgot to tell my my therapist that I work with.
You told a friend?
So the happy part of the story is that I have a new partner. And so she knows that I'm here talking. That's one of the reasons where, if you imagine I wasn't able to find kind of that feeling of affection and intimacy most of my life, and suddenly it's just appeared. Yeah, I have a new partner now.
While you were going through this, and for a good portion of that time, you were cohabitating, you're going to work, outside of, or perhaps even including mental health professionals. How many people ever knew the extent of your pain?
My immediate close family, and I guess 4 different doctors.
Did you leave stuff out? Did you tell them about the hotel?
I've only told 3 people that.
You have. So you were sharing stuff, for sure. I think it's common. I'll go to a point, but I don't want to worry them. Whatever the reasons are, I don't want to worry them. They don't need to know about that thing because it didn't come to pass. So let me just bury that shit.
I know. I was in that period, that 8 months, because I was so concerned about having these really difficult thoughts involuntarily. I would try and talk through it with people when I, at least when I found a safe moment to, because like life is stressful and stuff. But when you go, look, here's where I'm having a bad day, here's where I'm struggling, I wouldn't hold back. There was bits where I say, like, I don't want you to get full frontal of the awfulness of the contents of these thoughts, but you need to know that I'm having a really horrible day with this.
So you have a partner, but I'm wondering how many people, and you kind of already alluded to this somewhat, where you can talk about the really hard things these days. Today comes up, even the S word.
Since the burnout and the collapse and the sort of visible, everything's different now, I've talked about it with anybody who's willing to, really. So my parents, family, I have obviously the same doctor still. I've talked about it in my previous workplace and tried to kind of promote self-care in that situation. And the idea is that, like, if it can happen to me, as I say, white middle-aged male with plenty of privilege, if it can happen to me, probably can happen to lots of us. And we need to be talking about it, and it needs to be okay to talk about it so that we can seek help early.
I focus more on who's hearing you when you talk about it and how they respond. That's my jam.
That's mixed. Some people, clearly you can watch them turn it off straight away.
Yeah.
And every so often you see someone go like, shit, yeah, this message is for me.
Oh yeah, for sure. Right. It's cool.
That's kind of why I'm talking with a little bit of a pseudonym in this conversation, because I want people who are looking for this podcast to find it and hear it, not necessarily people who are looking for gossip about me, you know?
Most people aren't going to find it by chance, but you never know. in terms of people you know, but it's possible you might hang out in circles. And you had that presentation, right? Was there another one, or is that a one-off?
It's only happened once so far. I offered it up a second time and people did a sort of health and safety panic and wouldn't let me do it. But the first time it was scheduled to be an hour. As happens, I actually sped up and kind of finished a bit quickly.
Yeah.
But I had the best questions and answers at the end.
That worked out really well. Yeah, I had more time for that.
It was really good.
That's great. That's a good sign that you did something good.
If you imagine it was a couple of days event, I couldn't really move through the event for the next couple of days. People would just come and talk to me and say, what you said was really important. We have to have these conversations. I'm glad you're feeling better now. I just couldn't get to any other sessions because that kept happening. And that actually, I'm happy with that. That's great.
Yeah, I think it's great. And then I think what happens often is you don't know the seeds you're sowing, and it does take time.
I mean, if you imagine how nervous I was walking into that, like my heart was pounding out of my chest. And it was probably 30 minutes in before I actually was able to look up and look at the audience.
Yeah.
And there was just people openly crying.
Yeah.
Like completely in that moment with me and completely engaged. And that's when I realized, like, I've done a good thing, I think.
And I've done a fair amount of stuff on stages. I bet in that moment, something shifted in your relaxing into the moment. Because now you're realizing, like, it's for them. I don't have to be perfect up here. Nobody cares that I forgot a line. They're engaged. Mission more than accomplished. So let me just keep rolling, baby. That's how it's been for me. It's kind of cool. I mean, I don't know your role in academia, so I don't know if you're the kind of person who's giving lectures and speeches or that's kind of new for you. But for some people, it really is rather nerve-wracking.
I've given, thousands. And that one was, I was never been more nervous in my whole life.
Yeah, you're not talking about suicidal ideation, I don't think, in your lectures. I don't think. So do you take meds today?
Yes. There's one that just helps me sleep. And after a lot of trial and error, there's one that seems to give me energy. I actually personally reacted really badly to the S in SSRIs and SNRIs. That was messing with me really badly. And when we just dropped the S and went for the NRIs, then I found something which seems to work. It's actually only prescribed for helping smoking, so I have to pay lots to be able to have it for not quitting smoking. It seems
wait. Why don't you just start smoking and then quit?
That's probably cheaper, only just.
I mean, I don't know how long you have to smoke for. I don't want to do it too long. It's unhealthy. You got meds, and do you see anybody these days, like a counselor or a therapist?
Yeah, I think that's really important for a number of reasons. So I kept that going. I sort of didn't need to talk to my psychiatrist anymore. But there was this gorgeous moment where when she realized that I was so much happier, she couldn't almost suppress this little happy dance. And it was very kind of like minimal because she's trying to be all controlled and professional. But that was towards the end of like, okay, I think you're good to go now and I'll put you in the care of your GP. Yeah. So I still do that. And I think it's really important, even though you walk out of some sessions like, I don't know what we did there. I just think having that place to go and talk is so important.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Let's talk about, and you brought it up, so I know you got at least one you want to get off your chest, which is myths or misconceptions.
This is one which my brain went for it, myths and misconceptions. So one of the ones that I feel it sticks with me vividly because it was like a early 90s Ricki Lake style message, which is that you have to love yourself before others can love you. And that got rolled out a few times with me. And it was like, I'm trying. Like, do I have to love myself like before I can enter the market sort of thing? Like, it just felt like it was a qualifier to then go out there and receive love from other people. So I actually reinterpreted that more recently as like, you can observe that love for yourself because you're trying to be better. You're trying to have an easier life. You're trying to have a better experience of the world. That's the love right at the core of it. You don't have to necessarily like, yourself in a romantic sense or whatever. But like the fact that you're out there looking for solutions and better experience, that's love right there.
Okay. So the myth is sort of how we're using that word in that context.
I think so. That's one that hurt me a little bit in the past. And I thought, I'd just bring it up. The other one we've talked about was like, you go and get better, then come back to this exact life that you're in. This workplace, this whatever. Sometimes the situation is part of the problem. The context is part of the problem. There was this really painful comment that was made, like, obviously I had at least 20 years of depression. And it was, someone said, well, you can't love someone out of their depression. And actually that probably needs to be questioned. Like, you don't sort of stand back and say, like, you're on your own here, sort of go and get the help you need, go and get the meds. Right. I think the people around you can show you the type of love that helps.
Yeah, that sounds like a statement that's coming from like a very medicalized model, right? Like the only way you're going to get better is if you treat it with these things, which certainly could help. But to suggest that love isn't part of the solution for many people, I agree with you.
Towards the end of my kind of exploration of looking for things that helped, there was this poem by an Indian poet. I think it was Rumi. Uh-huh. And it's been translated and mistranslated and retranslated multiple times. But there was a version of it that really, really hit me hard again. And I keep talking about these moments that resonated for me. So it's talking about, like, most of us have some kind of, wound of some sort, like a tough childhood or an important loss in our lives.
Birth.
Yeah, right. And so the sort of the translation talks about it as being, you should pay attention to that wound and take care of it. But, and this is the bit that really stopped me in my tracks. So it's metaphorically talking about psychological wounds. And it says, do the work of healing, but don't believe for a moment that you're healing yourself. Yeah. So in my understanding of that, it's not just the individual that you're healing. Mm-hmm. It's the system. You might be able to change the system around you. You might be able to sort of have a better system and change it, relocate kind of thing. But when I've been healing, it's been my relationship with the things and people around me which has changed. I think I probably still carry some of these wounds, and I might carry them with more grace and dignity now. But I don't necessarily think that it's just me that's healed. I think it's my relationship to the world.
Go Rumi. Do you ever get back to England?
Every few years.
When you go back, the next time you go back might be the first time we could really ask this question. And you go back to your old hood, your old area. And I don't know if you have older relatives around. Do you think this is one of the weirder questions I've asked, admittedly. Do you think some of them would look at Paul now and be like, good for you, but you're kind of soft. The tough English guy, just the grit, which didn't work for you. It almost killed you, right?
Yeah.
Do you think some people look at it through this lens that it's like almost always like this negative pejorative, even if you're doing well, because you're a little out of the mold now?
Well, like in terms of just reinforcing the idea of being tough, like I was chucked into rugby when I was like 7 years old with the explicit idea of like toughen him up. Yeah, this is a sort of gentle lad who needs to be toughened up, ready for the world. And again, me being me, I just kind of went hard at it and got really good at it. And I've got tons of scar tissue and broken bones now as a result. But like, there was that toughen up instinct somewhere in the culture. Weirdly, my experience has been that at least the people I've been close with and spoken to, I've almost just been like, good for you. Like, if you're happy, maybe we were wrong. It's very strange. I was there recently and it feels like the whole place has shrunk. Like the streets I used to grow up on and run around, and it took, forever to get down the street to my friend's house. It felt like 3 strides. So that was very different. And like, obviously there was a TED talk I saw where when you leave a place behind, like you both keep growing, but you grow sort of apart. So I've grown my way, my old home has grown its way, and we're just different now.
What is that? Maybe that's where the movie starts or ends. Damn. You got that. And so now we have all this. Creativity is great, but it can be rather overwhelming when you're trying to put a project together.
I'm going to lean in favor of being creative though right now. It feels fun.
Do we have a memoir title? Or are we going to bleeding, burning, and letting go? Something maybe in there?
The title of the memoir. That was where you were coming down. Yeah. So you said bleeding out, burning out, like while crushing it, or?
Well, no, I actually changed it to like a little bit more Oprah. But it doesn't work, but it's on the path to maybe working, is like bleeding out, burning out, letting go.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's the words you used. But I was like, so it's not quite there, but I kind of like,
Yeah.
What time is it there?
Today.
I haven't forgotten about the final question, but what is the rest of your day like?
I'm going to go and see my son for about 2 hours and then drop him back. And I think I've got a meeting this evening with some people in Europe online.
Online. Okay, cool. For this particular episode, our final question, arguably my favorite question, the pink and purple pill question. And for our audience who might be first-time listeners, here's how it works. I'm going to give Paul a pink and purple pill magically through, in this case, Zoom. And he can do whatever he wants with it. Typically, people do one of three things. They either throw it out, save it, or take it. But should Paul take it, he would go to sleep, dream sweet dreams if that's what he chooses. He would expire. He would die. There would be absolutely no pain. And you don't need to include this in part of it, but most people want this. And it's that nobody would know it's a suicide. So middle-aged Paul went to sleep and simply didn't wake up. And the autopsy will just say a tragic death of a hardworking, enlightened man. What would you do with it today, right now?
Right now, I either wouldn't take it off you or, as you've said, just discard it. And contrast that to 2 years ago where I would have taken your hand off. Absolutely. That would have been the ideal solution to how I felt at that point in time. And now I know I don't need it, and I'm having fun exploring, what else is possible.
There is one more question because of what you just said. You did bring up some of these, but what's one other thing you're thinking about in terms of exploring possibilities? I don't know how specific you were thinking, or it was more open and abstract, but is there one thing in the next month, year, even 5 years, you're like, I'm going to do this thing, or I'm going to get this thing, or I'm going to go to this place?
You might be able to guess this from the contents of our talk, but I would like to be able to get on the stage again and talk about this to a wider audience, and whether it be, the traditional after dinner speaking or, some kind of event where this experience can't have been just for me to understand myself. I think there's stuff in here which is very human, but also helps us be better people to ourselves and each other if we understand how we operate, and why it's actually perfectly understandable for people to reach the point where not being alive anymore feels like a solution.
What's the main message of your speech?
Even if you think you're taking care of yourself, probably pause, go deeper, and prioritize it. That message around actually really going into what my needs were as a human being, different to other people's, and really understanding I need to feel these ways most days, a bit like I need to eat most days, right? I need to feel these ways most days or else I get in trouble. That understanding was just transformative.
That's good to hear, man. And I appreciate you talking. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much for this. I hope it adds to the vibe.
It will add to the vibe, man, for sure. Appreciate it, man. Enjoy your day with your son.
Enjoy your dinner.
Thanks, bud. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
As always, thanks so much for listening and all of your support. Special thanks to Paul down under in Australia. Thanks, Paul. If you are a suicide attempt survivor or ideator and you'd like to talk, please reach out. hello@suicidenoted.com. Remember our poll, pink and purple pill, on Spotify, and that rating and review on Apple helps. Yes, I'm going to keep saying it because it really does help. And that is all for this week's episode. Stay strong. Do the best you can. I will talk to you soon.